Gunjur Fitness Center Body Max.
Fire for body, and if you follow me go now, enjoyment go kill 'em. Baby girl, you bad, girl the way you whine, I demand over you, girl, I demand over you, girl. Say you are my woman, my superwoman. I demand over you, girl, I demand over you, girl. The wine I see fire for body, and if you follow me go now, enjoyment go kill 'em.
Moro mbijan do bakandro
ko ngalla janna kibaro moy kalka sola bagaso wafu
e ka fontelle ko solar enterprise fo fendi nabe dendi sola la fannala la sola la bundal ndella ko do kuwo ke mole janka sola joran kendo natala dum min nata na ko fanandiya birin Gambia jam fo Gambia e bantala nga bagasol samba be ton ka do ku kendo be ke mo be ni nga do ko ke momo ndi en ka sandi kilin garantie dilale nyin kama ko la do ko lanno so waran ni tema
bagasi falle
bagaso min bijay fofe nabe dendi sola la bundala la sola la fannala a bagaso sifa be bijay lightning and pumping system ndella fanan ko ke mole min be dendi na ko ni dandal ni kordal ka diodi ala nin ka lampo fanan se ka diala wo pumping wolbe dendi gadi nol ni ku kotal ni la ji ko ni la fanga bela lightning wala dimbani ku kotal danno mu sola enterprise tin ko la kadi
famo sola
fofe be dendi sola la hajo la janne be loro
wato tenta bul bagasol tan
adum fana be ku fula la leje bunda fula fana be mbulle fan ka bonan dami anin dula ba fula safonya America ni Europe na fan ka bana wolta dum doron no moto min ka fenken do na te sola la bagasol kana te nyam banko kanya
abanta bagasol tan
ngata.
For more information, call 7171-998, 7171-998, Gunjur Fitness Center Body Max.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. My esteemed viewers, this is Ahmed Manjang once again, and today I have a very, very important guest with Nfamara Fofana. I won't be doing justice to him to try to introduce him. So Nfamara will introduce himself, and his topic will be land use since 1985 and up to 2050 in the combos. You know, but before then, as you know, this program is daily COVID-19 update. And I will give just a brief, I will make it very short today about the numbers about COVID-19. Then Nfamara will come and introduce himself and start the program. Welcome to Gunjuru News Online. Okay, as you all know, we are in the middle of a major pandemic. And even though maybe we are what you call fatigue, the news fatigue or whatever, or people just got used to the numbers and it got used to these dead numbers. But this pandemic is showing no signs of slowing down. And in fact, already certain countries are showing the second wave, experiencing the second wave like Iran. But the rest of the world, I can say we are still in the fourth wave. You know, places like US, because it's different state, different regulation, and as a result, people have been moving about. You know, when New York was at epicenter, certain states in the US are still open, and as a result, numbers goes down in New York. Now we are seeing spike in over 20 new locations in the US. And Latin America right now is the epicenter, and India also is not far behind. And I can say Africa also is approaching its peak. And we have seen last couple of days, Gambia numbers start cropping up again. as the old saying goes, as far as the causes exist, the effects are inevitable. So we are not out of the wood. I'm, telling that to my fellow Gambians. This pandemic is real. It is here. We don't know when it will going to leave us. I think our best chance of getting away from this pandemic have to be vaccination. And I think now the earliest we can get this vaccination, against COVID-19, the earliest, that is the most optimistic date will be in September. That is to be the most optimistic. Since pandemic start in Brazil in December 2019, over 8,330,442 people are infected, and out of that, 448,138 dead. That's about 10% mortality rate. And for a virus infection, that is really, really high. That is on the wrong side, the extreme side, even though there are other viruses which are more lethal than this. In fact, the previous two corona pandemics in 2003 and also in 2012, we started in Saudi Arabia here, the MERS. I think you are familiar with the MERS, that is Middle Eastern severe respiratory syndrome, have a mortality rate of up to 37%. But that virus is not as infectious as this one, that I think in total affected about 10,000 people. But now we are talking about 8 million people already infected. The number of active cases, like people currently with COVID-19 infection, stands at 3,522,905. And that's about 98%. 98% of the active cases, that is 3,468,347, are in mild conditions, and 54,558, which is 2% of the active cases, are in serious or critical conditions. Top 10 most affected countries and the number of their infection they registered past 24 hours. Across the worldwide, 79,218 new cases were registered past 24 hours, and 2,950 cases died. Past 24 hours, America recorded 11,799 new cases, 329 dead, and Brazil recorded 5,935 and 129 dead, and Russia recorded 7,843, 194 dead, and India recorded 9,048 new cases, 144 dead, and UK 1,115 new cases, 184. I'm going to stop at the top 5 because it's a 1-hour program and we have an important guest. But the countries that are very, very close to the Gambia, the numbers are escalating. Senegal registered 122 new cases past 24 hours. And so far, Senegal registered 5,369 cases. And Guinea-Conakry recorded 41 new cases past 24 hours. And so far, Guinea-Conakry recorded 4,659 cases. And Ivory Coast recorded 340 cases past 24 hours. And so far, they recorded 5,679. And Mali recorded 5 new cases past 24 hours. And so far, their number stands at 1,890. Guinea-Bissau so far recorded 1,492 cases. And Sierra Leone so far recorded 1,225. And Burkina Faso 895. Gambia now stands at 34 cases. So these are the numbers for COVID-19 as of today, June 17, 2020. Nfamara, welcome to Gunjur News Online. Please introduce yourself to the Gambians, and please be generous, because to Gunjur News Online, be generous to yourself. Gambians are not very, very good at feeling themselves like the Senegalese, so we have to develop that one as well. So the Gambians appreciate, who is who, Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Manjang. First of all, let me thank you and the entire Gunjur Online News School for actually hosting me today. I am Nfamara Dampha. I am from a village called January in the Lower River region. I did all my schoolings in the Gambia, started at Tahir, Hamadia, high school from Tahir, and did my undergraduate degree at the University of the Gambia. I was very, very much involved in politics, student politics at the time. And I did my BA in development studies and minored in psychology. And briefly, I worked with the Minister of Fisheries on water resources and then went to the National Disaster Management Agency. The time I was leaving, I was Director of Administration at the National Disaster Management Agency. I was also part of the Mandela Washington Fellows. We were the first cohort from the Gambia to the United States. That was my introduction to come to the States, and I was placed in the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And I went back to the Gambia. A year later, I came to do my master's in international development, minored in science, technology, and environmental policy. And I felt like I wasn't satisfied. I decided to pursue a PhD in climate change policy and natural resource economics. So the name of the program in general here at the University of Minnesota is called Natural Resource Science and Management, but it has 8 different track areas. So what I actually studied, and all my study actually focuses on the Gambia. I have 4 chapters of my dissertation, and today I will introduce one of those chapters.
Brilliant. Welcome to Gunjur News Online. You might proceed.
Okay, so we got slides to show. Are we able to? I can't tell if. Are you able to show my slides?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Right on the screen here.
All right, yeah. I can see the screen. I can only see my own from this end. Yeah. All right, so today this is a topic very, very dear to my heart, and then I hope that we can have a conversation on it and kind of present my perspective and sort of the evidence from the science and the data. I hope that at every stage of this presentation, as you stay on, you are able to learn a little bit from every single slide. Time may be a factor because I have a lot to share, and that may be into a longer presentation here. So the other thing I want to say before I start, I have been thinking a lot about the audience here. I understand that social media and it's a mixed audience. It's not an academic level. You can think of it as a but the language that I'm speaking is a language of a discipline, and then I'm obligated or expected to speak the language of the discipline. So I will try to break it down and try to define certain concepts for my audience to understand. But if some things are not clear, please, I seek your indulgence on that. The other thing is that this is an ongoing project. The result of this analysis is expected to be published. So I reserve the rights for to use all of the images that are created by me. Having said that, I will introduce the topic. So today, this is a change detection. It's basically a land use, land cover change detection in a specific region in the Gambia, which I call the southwestern region of the Gambia, and I will introduce that in a little bit. But what we are looking at from this topic is that we're looking at how much change has occurred in terms of the way we use land, and then how much change can we expect going forward. And we did some, ecosystem service assessment there, basically looking at carbon stock or the carbon storage over time, and sequestration and valuation. So some of those concepts I will define as we go on. The outline today, it seems very academic in terms of how we present this information. It is really, standard academic way of presenting this type of work. You have an introduction, and bear with me, I'll spend a little more time on the introduction on issues that are not specifically related, but really important for us to understand as a country. And some of those will be very thought-provoking as politicians and policymakers are listening, hopefully. And of course, we introduced the study objective, the questions, the literature, the methodology applied, and results. So again, the objective of this study is simple. It's a simple change detection. We want to assess change of land use, land cover, and carbon storage, and evaluate the sequestered carbon within a specific region, like called the southwestern region of the Gambia. And the questions are here. We have three fundamental questions. And question one says, to what extent has land use, land cover changed between 1985 to 2020 in the study site? And what are the driving forces of that change? And number two, how much of forest cover will remain under different development scenarios? And number three is how much carbon has been gained or lost in the study site between 1985 again to 2020. And what is the economic value of carbon? We'll use the social cost of carbon to kind of evaluate the economic value of carbon lost or carbon gain in the study site. Let me start with the introduction. And as an interdisciplinary scholar, I consider myself, I like to think of issues from an integrated approach. And I think that the subject matter at hand here is not a sectoral issue. It's not just about the Department of Forestry or the Department of Parks and Wildlife. This is about almost every sector and the economy as a whole. So in the Gambia, when we think about, first of all, to start with, where are we in our development trend? We are highly, highly indebted and highly underdeveloped. We are one of the poorest countries in the world. And we use different indicators or metrics to kind of understand at what stage we are, looking at various things, various indices that have been developed by different institutions. And here, what is important to pay attention here is basically the socio-economic indicators of our country. We use to measure that by looking at GDP per capita, we look at per capita income, we look at poverty rates, and we look at unemployment. Sadly, you can see a lot of red in these images. That simply means that we have a lot of poverty in the country. Over 40% of our population live in poverty, absolute poverty for that matter. And in some regions like the Central River region, we know that poverty rates are about 71%. So this is really, really an issue here. And per capita income, compare Central River to Lower River region. Actually, Lower River region by person has the poorest person in the Gambia. So LRR, where I am from, is very, very poor. And unemployment actually not Central River region and Upper River region has the highest, but look at the West Coast region, about 22% of young people or within that age bracket live are unemployed. So these are really issues to take note as we think about development. And I'm going to introduce another indicator that we use when we think about national development, or and often I hear our politicians a lot of time talking about GDP. GDP has grown. GDP is basically the gross domestic product. This is an indicator that measures a country's income level. It does not measure well-being. That is, often people don't present that image of GDP. So when the Gambians, we say the GDP is growing at 6%, that does not mean that the Gambia is well off or well-being is of that standard. So GDP does not include a lot of things. It is not a measure of well-being. We have to understand that. And we need our policymakers and our politicians. Sometimes you hear the Minister of Finance, even the Minister of Finance, going to the National Assembly and talking to Gambians mainly from the GDP point of view. That is not an inclusive way of thinking about wealth and thinking about well-being and standard of living of our people. When we're thinking about well-being and inclusive approach, a comprehensive approach to well-being, we have to think about issues like human development. We have to think about social development. We have to think about the concept I love most, which is natural capital. Natural capital and ecosystem services that generate enormous wealth that contributes to GDP. But often that wealth is not being evaluated, it's not being accounted, it's not even calculated in the GDP metrics. So we have to look at other indices to understand holistically as a country where we are. But let's start with GDP. Even if we use GDP as a measure of income, look at per capita income in the Gambia is almost lowest, it's like $200 per person per year. Let me introduce some of the environmental indicators that kind of help us to understand where we are as a country. I will start with the Human Development Index that actually includes the human development component of our people. And today, think of this as an examination. That if we score 100, meaning we are doing extremely well. If we score 0, we just fail woefully, right? So the Gambia, we score in terms of our Human Development Index, we are at 0.46. And in terms of the environmental performance indicator, which is an indicator based on thousands of data points compiled by the Yale University looking at environmental health and environmental vitality, as a country, we are not doing well at all in terms of our environmental performance. Out of 100, we have 42 points. And take the sustainable development, again, out of 100, we got 47. So we're not even half yet. So, and this is the new approach to inclusive wealth. This is the new approach to sustainability. You cannot talk about sustainability by basically focusing on how much we are doing from an income point of view. We have to look at it holistically. And there are a lot of international efforts geared towards this. A lot of nations already have accounting systems, natural capital or green accounting systems that are factoring in the value of nature into economic well-being. And that includes the United Nations system of environmental and economic and environmental accounts, include the World Bank's wealth accounting and valuation of ecosystem services. All of these are indices that are actually out there trying to measure. One more indicator that
just to interject, sorry about this. The HDI, Human Development Index. To a layman, how would you simplify that? For our viewers to understand. You can say it in Malika if you want.
Yeah, that's fine. I can say it in English or Malika. I will just say it in English. The Human Development Index has 3 major indicators that go into it. Right? One is it looks at the income of the country, right? Income is still important. The second is it looks at life expectancy of our people, health component. And then the third is it looks at the educational indicator, how the schools, the knowledge that we have as people. So those are the 3 major indicators that goes into the Human Development Index.
Yeah, just to give us an idea how far behind we are, which country have the highest, so we can know how Gambia compare to other countries.
In terms of specifically the country with the highest HDI, I don't have the exact. I don't want to give you wrong number. But in terms of looking at the Gambia on the ranking of 180 countries, mainly we are around 150.
Wow.
With the environmental performance indicator, we are ranked 156 out of 180 countries.
Wow, so, that's terrible. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I want. That we have some work to do.
So let me introduce an accounting system, an environmental and ecosystem accounting system that I would want all of us to have our politicians, our policymakers tell us how we are doing. And I have never had any politician, any policymaker talk about the ecological account of our country. Now, the ecological account is, think of it as any other type of account. It measures 2 things. One is that it measures how much of the natural resource out there we consume as human beings and how much waste that we generate into nature. And it compares that to how much nature can handle in terms of the waste that we generate and the capacity of nature to regenerate new resources. In the environment, we have 2 major components. We have the renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Non-renewable are exhaustible resources. Once we use them, we run out of them. Renewable, we have to allow those resources to regenerate over time so that we can still depend on them. So and that introduces the ecological footprint. So what goes into the ecological footprint is really comprehensive. It looks at the fishery sector, how much fish stock we have and how much fish stock we use, right? The building, the animal products that we eat, meat and other type of products. Cropland, it looks at our carbon footprint, the cost of the energy we consume at home, and it looks at the forest products that we eat. So this is an interesting concept. And let me introduce the Gambia's ecological account. I think the central bank, the Minister of Finance need to have an ecological account. I don't think they do, but this data is available to be used and it can help our policymakers in terms of the way we think about ecosystems and ecosystem wealth. Now, there are 2 concepts here. Let me define that for the audience to understand. There is something we call the biocapacity. Now, biocapacity, think of it as the productive land that we have as a country to be used for our purpose. it means nature's reserve. Nature gives us these resources for free of charge. We don't pay anything for it, but it's given to us as a country. And we have so little of that resource as a country. And every country has limited biocapacity. And if you think of it as an accounting system, that is the revenue side of the account, right? That is what we have, the stock. If you look at the expense or the expenditure side of the account, that is the ecological footprint, how much we consume from the resource that is being given to us from nature. So if you subtract the ecological footprint from the biocapacity, again, the biocapacity is what you have, and it's measured in global hectare. Now, global hectare is a standard hectare because hectares in different countries differ. But global hectare is an ecological productive area that every country has. So if you subtract that, the Gambia today, we are running at a biocapacity deficit, meaning that we have exhausted our reserve in terms of the natural capital we have in that country, right? Wow. So in other words, we can say that as a country, we are ecologically bankrupted, and this is really unsustainable. So, wow. And I just want to show some more information on that, comparing the ecological footprint. Again, the footprint is what we use, the waste that we consume, we generate, and the resources that we use. The biocapacity, again, is actually the productive space that we have that nature provides for us. And again, this ranges from the fisheries sector to terrestrial ecosystems that we have, right? So over time, what did we see? Over time, we see that the ecological footprint of a Gambian on average is been increasing. So that means that we are using more resources and our carbon footprint is increasing because of economic conditions of our country. More people want to drive more cars and all that stuff. So we're destroying more forest areas and all of that. So our footprint on the ecosystem is been increasing over time. And that's what we see. What we have 1.5 million global hectares of ecologically productive land as a country. That's all we have. And we can manage that sustainably, manage in a way that it can sustain us 2 generations, or we can exhaust it, and then we have to be what is called an ecological debtor, or an ecologically or at a biocapacity deficit. In other words, we as a country will be importing all of these naturally produced resources, food and other stuff, timber from other countries to the Gambia. So not only will we be financially indebted to the rest of the world, but we will be ecologically indebted. And that is really, really sad. So since 2000, the early 2000s, we as a country, the point here is that we are running at an ecological deficit. And let me go back a little bit, and so a way to demonstrate this in terms of, for some of the audience to understand. This is basically the biocapacity of a Gambian. One Gambian 50 years ago used to be about the size of 4 soccer fields or football fields. One Gambian has the size of about 4 football fields of ecologically productive space to use for consumption reasons. About 50 years ago. Today, the average Gambian has just the size of a football field, just 1 football field today. That's what we all have on average. So this is really interesting because this is saying all of what we can benefit from nature, each Gambian has a size. And in this football field analogy, it's that you need to understand that it's not just about fisheries, it's not just about agriculture, it's not just about forests, it's about everything that you consume as a person is included in that space. And if you look at the projections on this, by 2050, an average Gambian will have less than half of the size of a football field. In some regions, it will be like less than 10% of the size of a football field. Wow. That introduction is important to come to the study area. And that is why, fundamentally, I chose this area to be the study area for this project, just because of the trend, the unsustainable trend that we are seeing in the country. So my study site is the southwestern region of the Gambia, and it includes 3 major regions: West Coast region, Kanifing municipality, and Banjul City Council. So those are the 3 regions. You combine them together, I call it the southwestern region of the country. What is important to note here is that, Mr. Manja, about 60% of Gambians today live in this small area. And this is less than 200,000 hectares of land. About 60% of the Gambians today live there. The rest of the country has 40% of the population. That means a lot in terms of how we think. if you look at the biocapacity that we have for an average Gambian who lives in this area is about 0.15 global hectare. It's not even half of a football field.
Wow.
So what that means, yes, population is a fundamental aspect of it, but it's also how much ecological damage, how much land degradation we have done at the site. And I'll tell you more about that. So if you compare the biocapacity to an average Gambian in this study site to the ecological footprint, remember the ecological footprint, the average Gambian has an ecological footprint of 1 global hectare, 1, right? This is very small in the Gambia, but in some countries, in the United States here, an average American has an ecological footprint of 8 global hectares. In the Gambia, it's just 1. That is just because the way consumption patterns are here in the United States is different from the Gambia. Notwithstanding, the urban Gambian has an ecological footprint that is over 1 global hectare. So fundamentally, look at the ecological biocapacity account in the western region or the southwestern region of the country, the deficit is even more. It's about minus 1 global hectare. So we are running at a deficit there too, compared to a national average of about minus 0.3. Interesting thing to take note. Let me introduce the data that is being used for this analysis. For a lot of us probably don't know this, but the United States Geological Survey has data, remotely sensed data from 1970s. They use a satellite called Landsat, and Landsat from Landsat 1, now we have Landsat 8, and this satellite remotely sensed data has a 30-meter spatial resolution. And the European Space Agency also just launched another satellite called Sentinel-2, which actually even has a better spatial resolution, and that is 10-meter spatial resolution. Landsat has a temporal. When we say temporal resolution, it means how often does the satellite orbits the Earth. In every location, Landsat satellite comes over you every 16 days. It scans your environment every 16 days. Right? So that is a lot of data we are having to be able to use that data to inform policy. Every 16 days, we have a satellite that comes to January and scan the environment and all that stuff. Some of the data came from the Gambia Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank. I got some spatial data layers from the World Bank as well. So here's the flow of the data and the satellite sensor's name. I'm not going to go into that technicality, but to explain a little bit about the data analysis. The data analysis was based on two phases, right? Phase 1 was the GIS-based analysis, which is actually geographic information system-based analysis. In other words, I use a software, download all of this remotely sensed data and do land use, land cover classification. And I use a supervised base classification based on pixel-based using random forest algorithm. So the other aspect of the data was to use a model by the Natural Capital Project called the Integrated Valuation of Ecosystem Services and Trade-offs model. They have a bunch of models, but I use their carbon storage and sequestration model to kind of predict what we see in terms of the carbon sequestration of the study site. And that is that's just the schematic model of the analysis. Let me give you some results here, interesting results. First of all, let all Gambians know today that as a country, our forest cover is about 42% of the total land area. And by definition, in the Gambia, by definition, forest cover includes grassland, some planted forest, and mangrove forest. Now, that's important. That's an important definition to take note of. And then, if you look at the map, if you can see it very well, the thick, what I call forested, is actually what the Department of Forestry calls closed and open forest parks. In other words, are the best forests that we have in the country. And the best forest cover in the Gambia today, as we speak, as of 2019, better forests with good ecological or habitat conditions are all found in the West Coast region. Wow. If you look at the Central River region, you look at the North, the Upper River region, we seem to have a lot of grassland. But what you and I will classify as really thick forest, most of this are in the West Coast region. Another reason why I chose the West Coast region for doing this analysis. Now, I just want the audience to know that when I say forest, close and forest, I am referring to the 6% of the land area that is classified as close and open forest by the department. When the Department of Forestry did their last assessment, this number was about 8% of the total land area. Today, it's 6% according to my analysis. Now I'm going to show you the locations of these closed and open forest parks across the country. I was able to remotely sense this and digitize it and get the data, and we're able to evaluate the condition of this forest park, the habitat condition of these forest parks. If you look at the Central River region right there, we see a lot of forest there is already degraded or depleted or deforested, largely deforested in the Central River region, right? And again, forests in good habitat conditions seem to be found in the West Coast region. Actually, North Bank region does not seem to have any forest. It's all gone. It's all bare soil. That's an ecological disaster, and we have to restore the forest cover in the North region. I'm just gonna quickly go and introduce the fourth question and say the results about that. To what extent has land use changed between this period in the study side, and what are the driving forces? Let's give you the results. Now here's what we detected. What we detected is that in 1985, the southwestern region of the Gambia has nearly 70% of the total land area as forest, green space, 70% of the total land area in 1985. In 2020, that number has dropped to 55%. Some of you may think that, okay, 75 to 55 is not that, but that's a lot of forest area. And if you look at the trend, especially from 2003 to 2020, actually it is higher. So the trend from 2003 to 2020, if that continues into 2020, I will give you the results on that when I get to the scenario aspect of this. But another thing to use is the normalized difference vegetation index. This index kind of explains the vegetation health of the area of the land cover, in different periods. So if you look at the first one on top here is actually the 1985 imagery. In that imagery, obviously we can all see green space or green areas. The greener the area, the more habitat, the more forest cover we have. Right? Come to the last part of the image, the bottom image there, you seem to have more red areas, meaning that the forest cover has gone. So, and from using this in the index, we are able to establish the fact that actually it is true that the land use, and all Gambians can attest to the fact that we have depleted this area significantly. And the summary of that result shows that forest cover declined by 5%. So look at it. From 1985 to 2003, it was only 5%. We have not seen a lot of change, but from 2003 to 2020, it increased by 18%. More than 3 times, right? Relative to 1985 levels. So in contrast, look at the developed space. The developed space by 2003 compared to 1985 was about 15%. And from 2003 to 2020 is about 65% increase in developed area or human settlements. So urbanization, that is the expansion of urbanization. For those of you who like the soccer or football, this is equivalent to about 30,000, the size of 30,000 football fields. That is the area that we lost in the southwestern region of the country. Now let's look at the remaining forest that is there. And the risk that it faces right now to the remaining forest cover in the study side. You are in this we can evaluate the risk of destruction. The forest cover that are of high risk to destruction, human destruction, are considered to be open forest areas. In other words, the department does not even have the data on the area of this forest cover. These are the open forest covers in the southwestern region of the country, and they are highly vulnerable, highly risk to human destruction. A lot of, I will go into the other issues when I get to the literature, but we know that there is actually loosely defined land ownership rights. Actually, what communities are doing now, if they can, they sell this land to real estate developers, knowing that anytime government can come and take this land from them. So there is high risk here. So we need government intervention. I will tell you, these are the locations, these are the descriptions of these forest parks. We have one in Basso, Kitty, in Gunjur, in Berending, the list goes on, in Somita. All of these areas, I can tell you the direction to go to the site. I can tell you the habitat condition of the forest right now. and the risk that it faces and the area extent. Now, I consider these as proposed protected areas because these are areas in good habitat conditions. So I think if the department can listen and care about it, is that they can propose to protect this area, but they cannot protect it without community consultation. So it has to be an integrated or a co-management process by consulting the community to ensure that these areas are protected. And if you look at the size, it's about 6,161 hectares. That is equivalent to 3.38% of the total land area. So if we can protect it, that is progress towards sustainability. Now, here are the forest parks that the department has documented on, thanks to the recent environmental compendium statistics that the Gambia Bureau of Statistics compiled. It is interesting that this data is very, very accurate. I can say that because I evaluate this data by doing my own analysis. And I found similarities in terms of what the size of the area. But what I found in terms of the condition is depletion and degradation. We have seen a more degradation of the space over time, and that is because of human interference and other private sector activities that are taking place. But overall, the closed forest area we have outside is about 4,321 hectares, and that is equivalent to about 2.8% of the total land area. Here's what the literature says. The literature says that from 1945, Mr. Manjang, to date, the Gambia has lost about 50% of its forest cover. This work has been done by about 50% of the land area that used to be forest in our country is now lost. And phenomenal work has been done by people like Jato Silla, Ablai Danso, and other foresters at the Department of Forestry. They did this was an excellent job because at the time, the technology that I have access to, they don't have that, and they did an excellent assessment of the forest cover. The first notification report of the Gambia says that deforestation rate is about 6% per annum, right? FAO's estimate says that we have a reduction of about 19% in forest area between 1998 and 2020. And another study by Hassanal and others said that we had a decline of there's about 11,000 hectares between 2001 and 2013. So this is not just about me saying. Some people have done some work on this and they are able to find similar results. What are the causes of deforestation, especially in the side that we're looking at? Definitely climate change, droughts, and increasing bushfires, right? But urban expansion, real estate development, we have seen that is really going at a very fast rate in the region. A lot of communities are selling community land, or government is also grabbing community lands for different purposes. And we also see timber extraction happening for local reasons, but also for export reasons. We see the infrastructural development, expansion of roads, markets, and schools. All of these things have an effect on the ecological infrastructure that we have as a country. And if you don't watch this documentary, I really recommend it to my audience that Omaru Fofana did an excellent documentary on forest cover loss in the Senegambia region.
Senegambia region, yeah.
And according to Omaru Fofana, from 2014 to 2020, the Gambia has lost about 600,000 tons of forest wood, rosewood, right? This is equivalent to 1 million trees, and the economic value of this is about $300 million US. That is a lot of. Where is that money going into? Now, in things like this, if you think about sustainability, there is something called weak sustainability. The idea of weak sustainability is to use natural capital, okay, and use the money generated from natural capital and inject it into the economy, meaning invest in other capital development, like human capital development. But sadly, in the Gambia, we are losing this natural capital, and the money is not coming back to the community to develop us as people. So that is crazy. Why can't we cope deforestation? There are a lot of challenges. We have institutional challenges, limited institutional capacity, resources, right? We have lack of enforcement of our environmental laws. Famara and Omar always talk about that, right? We have an enforcement, right? Lack of clear land ownership rights. That's a big on land governance. I recommend you to read Bensouda and Cole's report on land governance in the Gambia, especially if you're interested in this. I think that report.
Just last week I was reading it. In fact, I said with Dr.
Bensouda will tell you that actually our land ownership rights are not clearly defined. A lot of areas by our books are considered to be state land, and that is just ridiculous. Like, we have to change that. We have to review those things. And we have a lot of corruption and also bribery in the sector. Let me go into the projections here. We have 3 development scenarios for the site. We have business as usual. We have a new capital city scenario. I'll tell you more about that. And we had sustainability scenario. What is business as usual? Business as usual scenario extrapolates future land use change based on past trends. What we are observing from 2000 to date, if that trend continues, and with the assumption that in terms of the protection that we can do, with the assumption that we as a country will be able to protect the closed forest areas that I highlighted above, and then the open forest areas I highlighted, if we can protect, and I also recognize the role, the amazing role of civil society organizations like Green Up Gambia. These organizations have ambitious targets. They're talking about 10,000 trees, climate action. Some of these will be in the West Coast region, right? We recognize institutions like Help Gambia and other organizations that are doing work in this space. So essentially, if you put all of this together, this is the model we see in terms of business as usual. From 85, you see that green space is declining. And by 2020, the region will only be left with about 7% of the total area as forest, sadly. But 7% of the total area is what will remain forest if the current trends continue. Let me tell you more about the new capital city scenario. On a different chapter of my dissertation, I did an analysis on site suitability analysis on where the Gambia should locate its new capital city. And that's another interesting. But what I found, I surveyed over 500 Gambians. They told me, from public opinion, that about 52% of them said that the Gambia's next capital city should be located in the West Coast region, which means that my study site here. Think about that for a second. If we put a capital city in the West Coast region, it's probably accessible to a lot of people, 60% of the population. But what is the implication on the ecological? We know definitely certain things will happen. Property values will increase. Communities will be forced to sell their land, knowing that government can come at any time and grab their land without any compensation. So real estate companies will make a lot of wealth. They will buy this land, get the documentation, and resell. So this is what we're going to see. We will see a significantly more destruction of the ecological infrastructure we have at the site under this, even compared to business as usual. Only the remaining land area that can be assured of any protection is actually the closed forest area. That is the area that the department currently recognizes. That is the only area we can guarantee that may even be protected. The sustainability is the most important part here, because sustainability now is that we as a country, we have to leave a sustainable path, right? Development cannot just be about our selfish interest today. There is inter and intergenerational equity questions. We have to think about the future. If we destroy our ecological environment, ecological infrastructure, then the future has nothing to benefit from. So the West Coast region reserved about, in this proposal, about 25% of the total land area to remain as forest by 2050. And there are 4 targets, simple targets we can do this. And one is that we have to look into payments for ecosystem services. Why is this important? Because natural resources in developing countries, in whole countries, people depend on natural resources for their livelihood means. So you cannot just neglect that. You have to look into that. You have to look at protected areas. We have to look at urban agricultural reserves, and we have to look at green infrastructure. A little bit about this thing. Target on payments for ecosystem services. What does it mean? Payments for ecosystem services really means that communities are, once you know who owns what, communities are incentivized financially. In other words, they are given money that we will be giving you these cars for you to protect this ecological infrastructure. It should not be open to, land use conversion to urban or certain type of development activities. But certain environmentally friendly activities can occur there, like recreation, some sort of hunting with guidelines. Even timber extraction can be done, but it has to be in a sustainable way. So if we can reserve 10% of the land area for payments for ecosystem services, but first you have to start with what? Know who owns what. And there should be transparency in the process. Know who are the landowners and be able to this. So the protected areas, would be actually about 6% of the land area, and this is from the definition of the closed and the open forest area. What the department recognizes and what I propose to be protected. If you protect all of that, that's about 6% of the land area. Protected area means that you cannot do certain type of activities there, and there will be a poster or something to tell the public about that. Food security. West Coast region cannot transform all of its land to development. We have to look at agriculture. We have to reserve about of the land area for agricultural purposes. And here, this is going to create employment for young people, for women, and all that. And as a country, we have to always think about food sovereignty, not food security, because food security means, you are food secure. But food sovereignty means that you are able to grow your own food. If we don't grow our own food, we are importing food all the time. That is not sustainable, because you don't know what happens to the place that you are importing food from. Green infrastructure. This is the new age. It's a new age of development. You cannot do development without infrastructure solutions. These are nature-based solutions in urban areas. You need this for population, for flood mitigation. You need it for reducing urban heat island effects. So all of these things are important. But the sustainability approach should be co-managed. I am not a fan of privatization. Government should not privatize this land to individuals who will accumulate wealth at the expense of the community. So the co-management principle has to be embedded in this. And this is what we see. So under this scenario, we are able to reserve about 25% of the land area for sustainable use. Carbon. My last part here is just carbon. I know we're running out of time, but carbon aspect of this is really important. Carbon gain and carbon loss during this period. First, let me say, we know trees has enormous benefits. They have a lot of ecosystem service benefits, from rain, from livelihood, from shelter, medicines, oxygen that it generates, but more importantly, carbon sequestration. Sequestration simply means that over time, trees are able to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But another thing is that when you cut down the trees release carbon dioxide, CO2 into the atmosphere, and that contributes to climate change. And
climate change.
So we know the carbon storage of the tropical forest in the world, and you can see that it varies. It varies by country, by region. If you look at the Amazon region, per hectare you have a carbon stock of about 150 to 200 tons in a hectare. In the Gambia, it's not up to that. In the Gambia, it's about 1 to 3 tons per hectare. That is just because of our location there. The invest model that I use for the carbon storage and sequestration here is this. It looks at 4 different carbon pools: the above biomass carbon, the below biomass carbon, the soil carbon, and the carbon in dead wood. In other words, if you cut down the tree, the wood that you have on top of all of our houses, it has some carbon. So it calculates all of these carbons, and here's the result for the Gambia. Mr. Manja, what you see here again is that the total carbon we have in the Gambia. So here, the darker the area, the more carbon you have there. What did you see? You see that the West Coast region again has more carbon than any other region, right? Especially in basically more carbon. So the trees and the West Coast region really important again for carbon sequestration, for climate change mitigation reasons. This is really important. Let's look at the different images that we have. From on the top there, you see 1985 and 2003. Again, for simplicity reasons, the darker the area, the more carbon you have, right? Again, from 85 to 2003, we see more dark areas, okay, in the map. But if you come to the middle one, which is 2020, today, the carbon content of the land area has reduced significantly. And if you look at the projections with business as usual and with sustainability solution, the one on my left-hand side, you see less dark area, which essentially means that we have less carbon stored in the lands, in the terrestrial ecosystem. Here's the valuation aspect of it. Now, the valuation is really important because in the climate change economics discourse, there is a big philosophical debate on how much price we should put on a ton of carbon and how much discount rate we should use. So there are 2 principles or 2 philosophical approaches. We call it normative economics approach and positive economics approach. So the normative, guys, is actually where the Stone Review on the Economics of Climate Change. I recommend that book in this area. That book actually tells us that as people today, this generation, we have to use a lower discount rate and we have to price carbon more, meaning that the consequences of climate change will be higher on the future generation. So we have to pay the upfront cost to society today, and not how from the positive or the descriptive economics approach kind of says that, oh no, we need at least about 3% discount rate, and we probably need a carbon price of about $32 per ton. So there are different rates. My point here is that there are different rates on how much dollar value you I mean, you tag to a ton of carbon, depending on the philosophical argument or the philosophical angle that you're looking at. But let's take Stern's point, for instance, that climate change will have more devastating impacts on the future generations. So therefore, we have to pay for the price today. If we are to pay the price, the carbon that has been lost in the study side from 2003 to 2020, the price of that is about $7 million US. That is how much carbon. That is the cost to society. Think about that in that angle. And in terms of the megagram, that is about 21,824 megagrams of carbon. That's how much carbon is. So essentially, since 2000, the Gambia forest cover becomes a net emitter of CO2. In other words, before, our forest used to sequester carbon. We used to everything. Yeah. Now, the forest is releasing more carbon because of deforestation. So take that economic aspect also to give our policymakers an indication that not only the environment, but economically we are losing money, and we have this is a cost to society. On the different scenarios, again, what is important to note here is that with business as usual, going forward to 2050, we again see about $7.5 million US of economic damage to society if we keep business as usual. But if you take the sustainability approach, it's still, the model could not still give us a positive net emission. In other words, we are still not able to absorb all of this carbon than we can release. But however, we are able to reduce the cost on society to about 90%, and that's about 1 million cost to society. So sustainability is definitely better than the other model. And here are guys that you can, if you want to study this, if you want to study economics of climate change, study Nordhaus, study Stern. These people talk about this a lot. I want to conclude by looking at land value. The market value of land today in the study side is about 9 trillion to 12 trillion US dollars. That study side. That is the market if you take the price of an acre of land in the study side. And if you project this by 2050, the market value of land, so that is wealth in land, the market value of land study side will be about 22 to 30 trillion US dollars in 2050. Essentially, the point you should note is that by 2050, whatever plot of land you have, the value of it will double by 2050. That is the point here. The recommendations, Mr. Manjang, I would first start to say land reform. There has to be serious, land commission has to be set up. There has to be serious consultation in reforming the land, clearly looking at Bensouda's report on land governance and kind of see what change we can do with a very serious community consultation. And certain community has to be compensated. And on a very critical note, I think that Gambian youth, if you're listening to me and you are a Gambian youth, we should not take any politician seriously if they don't think about the environment, if they don't think about the ecological infrastructure we have, because we are the future. They are not telling us the real story. Any politician who does not talk about the environment does not deserve my respect, honestly. And I think as young people, we need to understand that the environment is the bedrock. It's the bedrock of functioning society. And in conclusion, I would like to say that in the Gambia, by 2050, what you will see, our population will double. You understand? Our population will double. The biocapacity of the country will decline, meaning what nature can provide for us, it will decline. Our ecological footprint will more than double because we want to be wealthy. We all want to have cars because human development indices will increase. The economic financial indicators will increase. So our pressure on nature will increase. But we have a choice to make. We can still put the right policies in place to live a sustainable life. And eventually, in conclusion, I think that the West Coast region today is running at an ecological deficit. In other words, the Gambia as a nation is ecologically bankrupted. Thank you, Mr. Manja.
Yeah, thank you, Farmer, very much. I have to tell you, I don't know where to start. You bring options, but how do we get this information across now? What do you think we can do? Because it's about getting this information to the common man and break it down for them to understand. Because if the common man didn't understand, we cannot put that pressure on our politicians. How do we do that? I think, forums like this. right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Look,
Forums like this, and then I think our young people, we see a lot of passionate young Gambians, and they are all listening.
yeah,
We have a role to
yeah,
play. We have a role to play. We have to. I like people to think about again our politicians. We have to hold our politicians and to the media houses. I would really think that every media house who interviews the politicians, right? You need to question them on the ecological wealth of our nation. We are living
yeah.
a sustainable life as a country. Let them not fake us about income. GDP is growing by 6%. It does not mean anything. The average
Anything, yeah,
Gambian life has not changed. The average
yeah,
Gambian is still in poverty. So
yeah,
we have to look at it. I like the work the media is doing. I think we need to encourage that. We need to
yeah.
also have civil society involved in this, holding the politicians accountable. And then I think that is the way to go. And even our educational curriculum, the school system, the teachers at the university, these are people who should present this information to the kids.
Yeah. One thing also we are proposing, like Combo Yiriwa Kafo, is to prevail on the government to come up with a moratorium that 1 year nobody should sell land. They just suspend everything and do sort of a survey and identify who owns what,
Yeah.
and then the government will come. Okay, we don't want anybody to touch here. Then you compensate them properly, and you know that's we are in preliminary discussion, but I think that will be a way to go, because if not, the rate at which these estate agents are going, very soon all those forests cover. And one thing interesting about these estate agents, once they vote, they will bring the bulldozers and
Yeah.
just take away all the trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they also need to be educated that you can build estates in a forest, in a forested area, and in fact you need trees, for health and beauty purpose, So what do you think of that proposal, and how do we go about it? Do that
I think
moratorium?
there is a way to regulate the real estate industry in the Gambia. I think from a regulatory point of view, we have to put those measures in place. That to develop an estate, this area of the land has to be, green space. You
Green
understand?
space, yeah.
Green space is actually important. I like the concept of the green space. We call it the green infrastructure, because in the Gambia, we don't have proper sewer or stormwater infrastructure systems, right? What that means is that when it rains, rain doesn't know where to go, and it gets into people's houses, right? Water will always find its way. Now, we have to do that, because those are, we consider nature-based solutions. In other words, if there is more green space, you seem to see that population rates increase, the water goes down, and that recharges our aquifers, and that is what we need to do. So I think the awareness, even people like green space, like anyone who develops a compound or a house, everybody would like to see some green space around, and we see more green space, urban green space, parks that the kids can play. So I think this is really an issue of regulating and also creating awareness. But again, to the policymakers, this is their role. They have to put these measures in place, and
Yeah, thank you, Farmer. Once again, we are dedicating, because we used to have these last year. We have some issues. Every 1 day in a week, we dedicate that to environment. It was going fine. So, and we agree again on Tuesdays. So on Tuesdays, if you are free, the same time, I'll be sending links. It's all about environment. We can come here and use this platform, and maybe try to link with the like of Mimbe Caring also, because he have a very, very wide viewership, and it's also located in West Coast region, to educate, because as you say, we are in red zone, we are running at a deficit. Ecological bankrupt. That's really scared me. I never think from that kind of angle, but that's a very good way of explaining to somebody that, what, ecologically we are bankrupt. We are on a borrowed time. So thank you very much once again. This is very, very good, and personally is going to benefit me immensely. And I believe also our viewers. Please share these videos so you can get to as many people as we can. Thank you, Nfamara. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to
So
have you.
any final notes in 30 seconds? I'll give you 30 seconds. That something you just want to say, anything.
I just want to say thank you and to the new school and the initiative as a whole. I think that this is what we need. I think more media houses should create environmental platforms, and let's keep the conversation going. So I am delighted to be here, and then look forward to subsequent events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessed with the mighty Atlantic Ocean, fertile agricultural lands, and a strategic geographic location that gives an opportunity for a lot of people to explore and get into the business. Gunjur and the Gambia at large has experienced numerous shutdowns when it comes to economy, and especially this COVID time. Please join us as we embark on a journey where we explore different areas of our business sector, from agriculture, fisheries, and small business enterprises. Gunjur Business is in short called Gunjur Biz. This will be a platform that we will use to explore different business opportunities, especially for young people. We'll bring you on Gunjur Online all the business topics that is related to financing, operations, marketing. And we will use this platform to invite experts from different sectors of the Gambian economy and give tips and have a broader analysis of the general business sector. This will give us an opportunity to be able to discuss in a broader detail how businesses are affected when it comes to our environment, our natural resources being exploited by other people, but also how we can tap into the opportunities and also access capital, which is very crucial for the success of the businesses. But not only that, we won't stop at accessing capital. You know what else we're going to do? It's about the little operational processes that are needed in our business culture to build up cultures that's going to be successful. And that's going to be, most importantly, what? It's going to be sustainable for the success of the business. So we can transfer wealth. We can also transfer skills from one person to another to be able to live in a community that is thriving, a community that businesses, private sector, individual businesses nurture entrepreneurship and reward them. So please join me every week on Gunjur Online as we delve into all these areas of discussions when it comes to business success. This is your host, Abubakar of Gunjur Online. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you.
Gunjur Fitness Center Body Max.
See the wine, I see fire for body. And if you follow me, go now, enjoyment go kill 'em. Baby girl, you bad, girl, the way you whine. I demand over you, girl. I demand over you, girl. Say you are my woman, my superwoman. I demand over you, girl. follow me go now, enjoyment go kill 'em.
Moro
Ibanya
mbijan do bakandro
ko ngalla janna kibaro moy kalka sola bagaso wafu
e ka fontelle ko solar enterprise fo fendi nabe dendi sola la fannala la sola la bundal ndella ko do ko ke mole janka sola joran kendo natala dum min nata na ko fanandiya birin Gambia jam fo Gambia e bantala nga bagasol samba be ton ka do ku kendo be ke mo be ni nga do ko ke momo ndi en ka sanji kilin garantie dilale nyin kama ko la do ko lanno si waran ni tema
bagasi falle
bagaso min bijay fofe nabe dendi sola la bundala la sola la fannala a bagaso sifa be bijay lightning and pumping system ndella fanan ko ke mole min be dendi na ko ni dandal ni kordal ka jiodi alla nin ka lampo fanan sika ka dial wo pumping wolbe dendi gadi no ni ku kotal ni la ji ko ni la fanga bela lightning wolo dimbali ku kotal jannum sola enterprise tin ko le kali
fam mo sola
fofe be dendi sola la haajo la janne be loro
wato tenta buru bagasol tan
adum fana be ku fula la leje bunda fula fana be mbulle fan kabana ndami anin dula ba fula safonya America ni Europe na fan kabana wolta dum doron no moto min ka fenkendo na te sola la bagasol kana te nyam banko kanya
abanta bagasol tan
ngata.
For more information, call 7171998. 7171998 for New Kidney Center Body Max.
Mande ati go di go ba for